Thank you so much for having me here today. We're often asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? What's your 5-year plan? What's your 3-year plan? Where do you see yourself 1 year from now? What are you going to do after you graduate? We go on to college and university in hopes of becoming what it is that we set out to be. It's what our business cards will say, and it's what our parents will tell their friends what it is that we do. It's how others will define us, and likely how we'll define ourselves. It's what we want to be when we grow up. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to ask Arnold, Manguela, and Anastasia what they wanted to be when they grew up. Arnold, in grade 5, Arnold told me how he wanted to become a pilot. And what he said was, when I'm a pilot, I want to have a children's center in a different country, somewhere like China. And when I asked Arnold why it is that he wanted to build a children's center, he explained to me that he had lost his mother the year before. And he understood that there were children in different parts of our world that were also in a similar circumstance. So he wanted to help. And he felt that by becoming a pilot, he could help. Manguela. Manguela told me how he wanted to become a professor. And what Manguela said was, children have many stresses, and I want to help them. Manguela shared with me how he had lost his parents when he was 5 years old. And he believes that by becoming a professor, he can help the children that are in similar circumstances and help them with his stresses. Anastasia. Anastasia, who at that time was in grade 7, one of the most articulate young women I've ever met. And when I asked Anastasia, what do you want to be when you grow up? She told me, I want to improve the standard of education in Africa. I want to mostly help the orphans read and write. I want to give them a place to live so that they can go to school. I want to help them become a distinguished person in their life. Anastasia said, I want to change their lives. You see, Anastasia didn't tell me what she wanted to be when she grew up. Instead, she shared with me who she wanted to be when she grew up. Unlike all of us here today, these children will likely not receive a secondary education. 29% of secondary school-aged children in the least developed parts of our world participate in secondary school. And the greatest challenges appear in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is their circumstance. Arnold, Manguela, and Anastasia represent what it is that I'd like to share with you in terms of our role and the future of education. You see, it was on this trip where I spent a lot of time at the different orphanages, and that's where they gave me my Swahili name, and they called me Mutanu. And Mutanu meant happy face. And I really enjoyed my time with them. But it was the lessons that I learned from them that I would carry on with me. And it was the lessons that I learned that would change my perspective in such a meaningful way. You see, these children, they didn't choose not to have access to electricity. They didn't choose not to have access to running water. And they didn't choose not to have access to a quality education. This wasn't their choice. They were born into that circumstance. And actually, that's when it clicked. It clicked that it could have been me. And actually, if you think about it, it could have been any single one of us sitting here today. Any one of us could have been born into a circumstance where we had to wait for the next rainfall so that there was water in the tank in order to bathe with. Any single one of us could have been born into a circumstance where we didn't have access to a laptop or the internet. There was no electricity line that was running through our community. And it could have been any single one of us that didn't go on to college or university because it would take half a day to walk there by foot on unpaved roads. It could have been me, and it could have been you. But we had the opportunity. We had the opportunity to complete a secondary education. We actually had the opportunity to go on and further our education and go on to college or university, essentially to become what it is that we want to be. And when I think about the future of education, I envision a space where it's not about what you want to be when you grow up. Instead, it's about who you want to be. And when we think about who you want to be when you grow up, that first starts with understanding yourself. Monguela said children have many stresses, and it was because of his circumstance that motivates him to become a professor. So let's take that and consider that for ourselves. What motivates you to do what it is that you want to do? What motivates you to choose what it is that you choose? What values drive your behavior? What's impacted or who's impacted your perception and how you view the world? We see the world not as it is, but as we are. And more importantly, what false assumptions do you have about yourselves that limit you from doing what it is that you want to do or becoming who it is that you want to be? What false assumptions do we have about others when we decide that we want to label them based on their position title? When I was in these rural communities, I was labeled a white man. And in those communities, there was absolutely no other word in that context that they had to describe me. The way I looked was different. My body language was different. My mannerisms were different. I was a foreigner. And in that context, I was the other. I was stared at and sometimes laughed at because I was different. And you see, we play this language game where we want to label and describe. We want to use these common words to describe a multitude of experiences or people. We label people based on what they look like, what they're wearing, their ethnicity, their gender, maybe their position title. We want to put everyone into these neat little boxes so that we can categorize them and essentially try to understand them. We talk about people's positions. So-and-so is a doctor, so-and-so is a lawyer. And it's when we tell people what we want to be or what we do that we allow them to define us based on the label. And you see, that's the difference. The difference is when you share what you want to do, you allow yourself to be labeled and defined. But if we want to talk about impact and identity, that's when we need to consider, who do you want to be when you grow up? It's one thing to say, I want to be a humanitarian. And as noble as that concept is, it's a completely different thing to say, I want to save the lives of those who have been impacted by disasters, whether natural or man-made. I want to save the lives of those who have been impacted by disaster, and that's why I want to become a humanitarian. Again, it's one thing to say what you want to be, and it's something completely different to express who it is that you want to be. And when we go back to Arnold's story, Arnold doesn't want to become a pilot for the status. Arnold wants to build children's centers. Arnold doesn't have a passport, but he knows that he needs to get to these different countries where he wants to build these children's centers, and that's why he wants to become a pilot. What you do serves as a vehicle for who it is that you want to be. And for him, it's becoming a pilot that's a vehicle for what it is that he essentially wants to do. I learned the greatest lesson from Arnold. Arnold showed me that we cannot predict our future circumstance. We can lose everything tomorrow. And more importantly, we can lose those that are most important to us at any given moment. And when we talk about the language game, there's no common word to describe that loss and that feeling of that loss. But Arnold wants to help. Arnold wants to help. He wants to build his children's center. That's what he wants to do. Treat people as if they were what they ought to be and help them become what they are capable of being. Treat people as if they were what they ought to be and help them become what they are capable of being. The traits that we admire in leaders, I saw those traits in the orphanages. Anastasia wants to improve the standard of education in Africa. Forget Kenya. She wants to improve the standard of education in Africa. She wants to help the orphans to become what she perceives as distinguished people in their lives. She wants to help them become what they are capable of being. We read books about leadership. We watch biographies of those who have impacted our world. We take our Sundays to attend events to hear various people speak. We are the small percentage of our world population that gets to decide what it is that we want to do with our time and how we want to spend it. And when I think about my time back in Kenya, I'm reminded of that lesson. We cannot predict our future circumstance, but what we can do is we can find purpose in the circumstance that we're in. And you see these young children, all under the age of 13, have experienced a life through a lens that many of us would find very difficult to understand. And although the stats suggest that they may have little to no impact in our world, that's absolutely not what they see in themselves. They see possibility. They're no different. In terms of their hearts, their minds, and their innate abilities, they are no different from the children that are born in Toronto, London, New York, Yellowknife, Paris, Halifax. They're absolutely no different, but their circumstances. And when we consider what our purpose is and finding purpose in our circumstance, I believe that a piece of that is to safeguard our potential and not to limit ourselves by putting a label on what we want to be. A part of it is to safeguard the potential in our children who want to change the world, because I believe they can live not in poverty, but in possibility. And a part of that is also to safeguard the potential in each other, to help each other become what we're capable of being. So the next time someone asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I encourage you, don't give them a title, and don't be labeled. Instead, tell them who you want to be and the impact that you want to have. I'm Ramit, and I was given the privilege and the gift of education. And I want to continue to give that gift through the work that I do. And that's the impact that I want to have. Thank you.